Welcome to First Responder Friday. My name is Conrad Weaver, and we are live here in the studio. A little bit different setup, so if I sound a little funny today from previous shows, it's because my computer decided to crash on me today, and I had to punt and use another computer, so I don't have the fancy microphone set up. But hopefully you can hear me well, and we're going to get started here. We have an exciting show today. We have a very special guest. But before I bring him on, I wanted to give you a little update on our film project. As you know, we are in a fundraiser campaign for our film PTSD 911, and we've raised a little over $4,000 so far to our campaign, and have a long way to go. But we only have like 13 more days on the campaign. So if you are so inclined and you would like to help us make a difference in our film, please make a contribution toward our film project. We would greatly appreciate it. And all the information can be found on Indiegogo, and you can click on the link. Let me see if I can pull up a link for you. Here's the link that you should go to, and you can go there and look at all the perks that we offer for our film, and make a contribution, support our efforts to support first responders. You know, today I'm wearing my Vigilant Hose Company shirt. So I live in Emmitsburg, Maryland, where we have a mostly volunteer fire station, and it's a pretty well-known fire company around the country. I think it's supposedly the most visited fire station in the country, mostly because the National Emergency Training Center is here in town. So all the emergency managers from around the world come here for training, and they all stop by the Ott House, which is our local pub, and then they go next door to the fire station. So in honor of Vigilant Hose Company 6, I'm wearing the shirt today, and just a little shout out to them. So today I have the privilege of bringing on Steve Hirsch. Steve is the chairman of the National Volunteer Fire Council, and he's involved in many, many different other aspects there in Northwest Kansas. And so I'm going to let him talk a little bit more about that. Steve, welcome to First Responder Friday.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where you're located there in Kansas.
Okay. My fire department is Sheridan County Fire District number 1. That is at Hoxie, Kansas. It's the 3rd county in from Colorado, the 2nd from Nebraska. So it's high desert out here, basically. Very, very much rural and very much remote. I'm the only fire department in the county. My closest mutual aid is 30 miles away. So 900 square miles, more cows than people.
Wow. So when you have a major incident and you have to call for backup, you are going to be waiting a little while.
That's right. We are.
Yeah. So are most of the fire stations out in that area volunteer?
Yes. Colby, which is probably the biggest town, which is not big by any stretch of the East Coast imagination, but that's 30 miles away from us. It'd be a population of around 4,000 people.
And so what's it like recruiting volunteers in that area? Is it something that's pretty easy to do, or it's a challenge?
For us, it's not been much of an issue. However, recruitment is something that you do 24/7, 365, because if you ever get behind the curve on that, you're in trouble. That's not to mean that there are not places in this country that have difficulty recruiting people, because we know that's the case. For us, where we're very rural and remote, we don't have the issue with people having a job in another community and not being in our community, to take calls during the day hours. So recruitment and retention has been pretty easy for us. In fact, we meet every week to do drills, and for about 5 weeks, because of the COVID pandemic, we were forced to go online in Zoom meetings. And we were even able to recruit some people during that period of time and bring them on, albeit virtually, bring them on the fire department. So I will tell you that we have a really good mix of people in my department, from old to young. My comment is always the old people like myself can keep the young ones from making the same mistakes that we made that potentially got people hurt or killed. And the young folks have the stamina to get things done. It's very important to have a good mix of both. And I will tell you that the young people that we have on our department, man, I couldn't be prouder of them. They step up. They do things that as they're told, and then come up with new ideas on their own. They soak up the learning like a sponge. I'm so excited because we've got several younger people on right now that have just come on in the last couple of months, and man, they're just good individuals. So for us, recruitment's not an issue, but it certainly is in some places.
Do you have a junior program in your area?
We do have. We have 3 kids now involved in our junior program. It's brand new. We just started this basically just before the pandemic hit, so that's been challenging. But we're back together again in meetings. So and those explorers, man, I tell you what, they keep things exciting around the station, and the guys are just doing a tremendous job of mentoring with them and making sure they understand what our mission is.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the challenges that volunteer fire stations face? And I know, many volunteer stations are more rural communities. What are some of the challenges they face that are different than like a paid staff?
Well, you never know who's going to show up. You might, in my department, with about 2,500 people countywide, we roster about 100 firefighters in our department, which is a pretty good number, but they're not all going to show up on the calls. You're only going to get a percentage of those. So you never know who's going to show up. And consequently, you have to have every firefighter from chief or the longest member of the department down to the youngest member and newest member of the department. They have to be trained so that they can handle whatever the incident is, or at least know who to call for help if they're the only one there, because it can happen. You can, in rural America, you have no idea who's going to show up. You have no idea how many are going to show up. Mm-hmm. And that's a real challenge.
I guess the good thing about rural America too, at least in my experience, neighbors are helping neighbors. And so if there's an incident, everybody kind of chips in to need to go help. And I've seen that, in the farming community, especially, when one farmer is sick and he has his wheat to harvest, the other farmers all gather around and take care of business. And
that's right.
I'm sure it's the same way with emergency response.
It certainly is. Yeah. It certainly is. Here a couple of years ago, I taught at a fire school in Hoisington, Kansas, which is out in the central part of the state, and their command vehicle pulled up there, and on the side of the vehicle it says "Neighbors helping neighbors in their time of need." And that sums up where we're at in the volunteer fire service very much. So I love the phrase.
So nationwide, do you know what the numbers are, volunteer versus paid? What's the ratio there?
I think that we often say it's close to 70% of the fire service is volunteer. Those numbers have slipped. If you look back 40 years ago when numbers first started getting kept on that, our numbers are down. And I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. One is that as communities grow, they see the need to have full-time career staff, and so there's some movement there. But we also see in a lot of our rural communities, there's an aging population, and that's difficult to recruit among people who are older, perhaps. In a lot of rural communities, the jobs are not there, so these people have either they move away or the jobs are in another community, so then you have day staffing issues. And I think probably as important as anything is that, my dad started the rural fire district in the north central part of the state in 1963, and I was born the year before that. At that time, Mom stayed at home, Dad worked. Dad was then available to take call at any time, and Mom was there to take care of the kids. Well, that's not reality today. Mm-hmm. The reality is both Mom and Dad are both working, and so if they have a family, that gets rather difficult for for a response. And then when I was a kid, if my parents were at school more than twice a week for sporting events or extracurricular things, that was kind of unusual. Now, I think if you had enough kids, I think you could literally be there every night of the week. So there's a lot of challenges for people's time, I guess. And I think that's the bigger part. I don't think it has anything to do with people not wanting to volunteer. Some of that is our fault too, because even in a community of my size, we still have people who want to know where our bedrooms are in the fire station. They don't understand that we're responding from home, we're responding from work, that we don't stay there at the fire station. We've kind of run away from that volunteer label, and we shouldn't. We should be extremely proud of it, because there's nothing that I've ever done in my life has ever been as rewarding as being a volunteer firefighter. It's an amazing business. It's always good to help out your neighbors, but there are challenges too. We have our rural communities. These people that are showing up to help out their neighbors, they literally are their neighbors. So that adds a little element to the stress that they have on the job. They see things that no civilian understands, some of the things that we see, and what that adds to the job. If the department's doing EMS, my department doesn't, but a good share do. If they're doing EMS, now instead of just responding to property calls where they put water on a fire, now they're dealing with people, and that's a whole different train of thought, I guess. And the call volumes in the EMS side of the houses have just skyrocketed. So you've got people who don't have a lot of time to begin with, and yet we're putting pressures on them to respond to more and more calls, and that's a real tension, I think.
You say the call volume has skyrocketed. Is that in the rural communities, and why would that be? Why has it gone up?
I think back 30 or 40 years ago, if somebody got sick, a family member put you in the car and hauled you to the doctor or the hospital. In our part of the world, there are getting to be a lot of counties that do not have hospitals, so it might take them, it might be 60 miles to the closest hospital, and putting them in the back of a car may not be as good a plan. So people are using EMS services more than what they did before for things that, probably 40 years ago you would have handled it on your own, and now we call EMS. Even for things that probably don't require EMS intervention, we've made it easy for people to call and ask for help, and we're type A personalities. We're going to go and get it done. We may grumble about the frequent flyer or whatever you want to call them, but yet we're still compassionate enough to know that these are people that we need to help.
So as the chairman of the National Volunteer Fire Council, what is you guys' mission? What's your purpose as an organization?
Sure. Well, it's to represent volunteer fire, rescue, and EMS personnel across the country. It's to provide them with good quality training. Or if you go on the NVFC website, nvfc.org, you'll see a lot of materials there for training firefighters, keeping them proficient in their skills and professional in the way they go about doing their job every day. There is a wealth of information on that website, which is linked to the makemeafirefighter.org website, which is a portal for departments who are trying to do recruitment. They can put their department in there. If somebody wants to volunteer and they don't know where their local fire department is, they can type in their zip code and they can find a department close to them that needs help. And then on the legislative front, of course, everything we do seems like it starts with a governmental agency nowadays. So we maintain a pretty active presence in Washington, D.C. to make sure that they're helping us or not hurting us in some way with legislation. So I guess those are three big things, but we've got a number of programs like the Heart Healthy program. Firefighting is a team sport, and we're only as strong as the weakest link of that chain. So we have to make sure that we're ready for battle at any time, because we're not working shifts. We're on call 24/7, 365. So we have to be on our game and be heart healthy, because we know that that's a leading cause of firefighter line of duty deaths.
And there's been some legislation regarding that, right, too, as far as benefits?
There has. I mean, there is a public safety officer benefit program, but that's been in effect for quite some time. The benefits have increased, and we've added some, the heart ailments to that, that really are helping families. 'Cause I'm going to tell you, when I became chairman, one of the things I wanted to do was to reach out to those departments that had line of duty deaths, not to just know that there's 60 or 70 line of duty deaths across this country every year among firefighters, but to talk with those departments and find out a little bit about the men and women who have given their all for their neighbors. And the thing that struck me when I signed those letters, it's almost like the president signing a letter to the families of fallen service members. At least I feel that way. It's a weight, but because I often think about those families. It's one thing to have a death, but you think about the families that are left behind, and their future is totally different than what it was before that death occurred. And we've got to make sure that, we talk about the brotherhood and sisterhood of firefighters. We just have to make sure that as a service that we're stepping up and taking care of those family members too, because that's important. We got to take care of our firefighters now, but we also have to make sure that we're taking care of our firefighters and their families in the future. When we in Kansas, I serve as first vice president of Kansas State Firefighters Association, too. Served for about 20 years as secretary. The last time we hired a lobbyist in Topeka, I said there are two things that we're never going to compromise on. One is the safety of our firefighters, and the other is taking care of their families in the event that something happens. Everything else is negotiable, but taking care of our firefighters and making sure that they're trained well, and then taking care of their families in the event that something happens, that's off the table. Those are things that we must do and have to do and are required to do.
And in that training with your volunteers, does that also include like mental health training and preparations for those traumas that they may experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very blessed in Kansas and in several states across the nation with and I'm just going to call out one of them, the 1033 Foundation. Don't know if you've heard of them or not. I think they're headquartered in California, but we have a very active 1033 group in Kansas that has made it their mission to go out and make sure that firefighters know that there are resources available. Now, the National Volunteer Fire Council program is Share the Load, which has a toll-free number that firefighters or EMS personnel can call in, and they'll be hooked up with someone that is in fact a first responder who can talk them through some issues that they might be having. We've also just recently on our website, we have a behavioral health directory. So there's a list of professionals who kind of specialize in the area of mental health for responders. But I think, when it comes to mental health, let's talk about the regular training that we get. We wouldn't send somebody in a burning building without having trained them as to how they put their SCBA on and what it's like to crawl around in a IDLH atmosphere. I hope we wouldn't put them behind the wheel of a truck unless we've taught them a little bit about driving a truck that weighs multi-ton and people won't get out of your way. In fact, their full mission is to get in your way, it seems like sometimes. We wouldn't put somebody on the end of a hose line without teach them a little bit of something about handling the hose line and perhaps friction loss and things like that, or throwing a ladder, or all the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. But yet we do have places across this country who don't think about the mental health needs of their professionals in their volunteer ranks. So I think when it comes to mental health, the mistake that I think we make is that we wait until something's happened and then we start worrying about their mental health. We need to be doing that. That needs to be a training program up front before things ever happen, so that they don't get to the point where it becomes an issue. Because we know that if we added firefighter or EMS personnel suicides, we'd probably double the number of line of duty deaths every year. I know, Conrad, you've been in Colby, Kansas before. They've had some issues with suicides among their members in their EMS agency. And I'm not picking on them, because it happens all across this country. We need to be training. We need to be talking about this stuff up front. So
why has it been such a difficult subject? I mean, I know that it's difficult in any circumstance, but why specifically in the fire and first responder community? Sometimes those things get, I had a firefighter tell me one time, old time firefighter, say, yeah, back in the day it was, get over it, here's a beer.
Sure. Yep. Which was probably the worst thing you could do. But I don't know. I think it's just that we're more aware of it. Social media has probably made everything a little closer to us. What happens on the other side of the country, we know about instantaneously. So I think we're just more aware of that. For us, again, little small rural remote fire department, we've had a chaplain for a number of years. We've sent our chaplain through this. We're actually on the second chaplain now. We've always made sure that we've provided CISD training for them, sent them off to places to get that. And then, of course, like I said, we have the 1033 Foundation in Kansas that we call on a lot. In my department anyway, and I think it's probably we don't do everything right in my department by any stretch of the imagination. Hopefully my chief's not listening on that. He's a great guy, but I'm the training guy in my department, so it all falls back on me anyway. But we meet every week at drill, and so once every 2 months, first meeting of every 2 months basis is health clinic for us. And that may be, we've talked about the health of your teeth, which is kind of a strange. I know we had a brand new firefighter that night, and we were talking about teeth, and I said, you ever think you were going to go to a firefighter drill night and you're going to talk about your teeth? Well, that's a pretty important part of your health. And we talk about diabetes, and we talk about heart, and we talk about the big C. Cancer is such a big deal. But this last meeting, when we had a health clinic, it was specifically about mental health. And we just do these periodically. It's not a one-time thing. It isn't any different than cancer, where we need to be cleaning our gear, and we don't do that once. We do it time and time and time again, and we clean our gear and all that stuff. Mental health is just as important. We gotta, we pull the dipsticks on the trucks all the time. We got to pull the dipsticks on our firefighters. I don't mean to be referring to any of our firefighters as dipsticks, but you understand what I mean. We need to make sure that we're checking up on their mental health all the time. And it's a little more difficult, I think, in the volunteer service than in the career. In the career, somebody's working a shift and you see them and you get, when things are a little bit off. With the volunteer service, we don't necessarily see them on a regular basis, maybe once a week at best. So the other thing we have to do is, since we're not going to be able to perhaps identify situations in firefighters that are going to lead to mental health issues, we have to make sure that we're training our families too. And we've done that as well, because we've had the 1033 folks come in and do training, not just for our firefighters, but for their families too, because they're going to notice it much quicker probably than we will in the fire service. So
do you think it's easier for someone in the volunteer service to, maybe they're struggling with an incident that happened and they just not show up, and so they're off doing whatever, they're drinking or whatever they're doing, and they're not showing up, so they're not in the community, and that they're isolating themselves.
Right.
And whereas a paid, they got to show up to work, because if they want a paycheck, they got to show up, right?
Right, very much so. And that's exactly why we have to be training our family members too, because that may be our first line of defense. In fact, it often is the first line of defense.
So what do you do? I mean, So one thing I like to ask my guests, what do you do personally to take care of yourself?
Well, we have, we've kind of got self checks that we go through from time to time. For myself, it's 5 little grandkids who manage to kind of keep me focused and in tune. There's a lot of negative in the world. There's a lot of nasty that we see. So we have to fill that up with some good positive stuff too. So we fill that up with our families, hopefully. For me, bicycling is kind of important. I can get out and kind of clear my head a little bit with that. In fact, I'm going to be doing that tomorrow up in Kearney, Nebraska. Not in a competitive sense, because they'd run laps around me. In fact, I have joggers, I think, who can run faster than I can bike. But I think there's all of those things. And man, I tell you what, we also have to focus. In my professional life as a prosecutor, I see, bad. I don't know. I hesitate to call them bad, but people who have issues in their life, and they've become issues with the state at this point because they've done things that are against the law, including sometimes young folks. And I always have to keep reminding myself that the ones I see are but a very small fraction of the total population. For example, in my community, I mean, there are so many good kids. My goodness. They try and do what's right, and they try and make their parents proud, and their parents are doing a great job raising them. Every once in a while, I run onto one where they probably need a little bit of direction, and so I get to be kind of a surrogate parent to them in a forceful sort of way. But I guess the same thing is true in the fire service. My goodness, if you look at all the good things that we do, they far outweigh the bad things that we have to deal with. And the pandemic has been, I say that volunteer firefighters during the pandemic stepped up in amazing ways. And yet I'm not sure that that's totally accurate, because I don't know what's so amazing about the fact that these are people who every day give their all to help out their neighbors. And then I'm surprised when they go out and get groceries for the elderly. I'm surprised when they haul somebody to the doctor's office. I'm surprised when they mow their lawn. I guess I shouldn't be, because this is just an amazing group of people that give their all.
Yeah. Well, and so we're talking here with Steve Hirsch. He's the chairman of the NVFC, the National Volunteer Fire Council. And Steve, you are a volunteer with this organization as well as a volunteer in your state. Is that correct?
Correct.
Because your day-to-day job is you're a lawyer, you're an attorney.
Right.
Yeah. So that's it's pretty impressive that an attorney can have time to do all these other things and to volunteer in their community like that.
We make time to do the things that we want to do. And again, I referenced earlier, my dad started a fire district in 1963, and I was born the year before that. So I haven't known anything other than being a volunteer firefighter my entire life, whether it was being there with my dad in the fire station while they were doing soup suppers to raise money, or whether it's now, being able to train firefighters in my own department and across the state of Kansas. Goodness gracious, if you want to talk about depression, if all I did was be an attorney, depression would be great. The outlet that I have is being a volunteer firefighter and being able to do some good for our community, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. You think that rural communities, they don't have maybe the number of calls that an urban community has, but there's still trauma. There's still traumatic events that happen.
Yep.
And in a smaller community, oftentimes as a volunteer, you're running to a situation, especially fires as well, but especially in accidents where it may be someone you know.
Yep.
And so how do you deal with those kind of traumatic events?
The majority of the calls that we're going to run on, whether they're fire or trauma related, are going to be somebody that we either know, we have had them in Sunday school before, we've went to school with them, or our kids know one another. That does add a huge, that's a huge factor among the volunteer fire service, especially in rural America, because I don't know how to say this. I guess if you're dealing with people that you don't know, maybe it's easier than people that you're going to see or that you have seen. It might be a little more. It's more troubling, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there's any magic to how you get over those type of incidents, except for the fact that you make sure that your firefighters in your department understand what the signs are of having issues with your mental health. You make sure that your families are trained so that they're recognizing it. You make it so that there's no stigma attached, and then you make sure that you know that that your people know that there are resources out there available for them. That's part of being a family, really. I mean, it isn't any different than giving them a T-shirt or having a family gathering at Christmas time. This is about loving upon the people who are part of your department. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars of fire trucks and other affiliated equipments in my station, and they don't do a damn bit of good. And I'm sorry for the expletive, but they don't do a damn bit of good if I don't have people who are well adjusted who can get behind the wheel and take them out the bay.
Mm-hmm.
While I got to maintain my equipment, I also have to maintain my people too.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's kind of the one thing that I've said throughout the course of working on this project, that when I pick up the phone and call 911, I really would like someone healthy to show up.
Yeah.
And
I find too that, and I tell chief officers this, is that in a chief officer class I do, is that when John Q. Public, or Mrs. Smith, I guess is what Bruno used to call the customer, when he or she dials 911, they expect the fire department of the city of New York to show up. The well equipped, well trained, very professional, able to handle everything and every piece of equipment that they need. Well, that's probably not reality in most of rural America. They're going to get people who care, but they're going to get people who they might be shorthanded. They might not be training as best as they should, and frankly, they're never going to have as much equipment as they need. There just isn't enough money to go around.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when they call 911, when that neighbor shows up to help them, they're going to be very appreciative of that. One of the things in my part of the world, as I told you, it's 30 miles to my closest mutual aid. And the reason why do we have to maintain the volunteer fire service? Because if I'm upside down in a vehicle in a wreck, I can't wait 45 minutes for somebody else to show up. If my house is on fire and I'm inside, I can't wait more than 5 or 10 minutes for a fire truck to be there. If I'm having a heart attack, I can't wait for 30 minutes for an ambulance to show up from a neighboring community. And that person who's upside down in the car, having a heart attack, or trapped inside a house, those are my neighbors. That's why we got to volunteer. It might be my family, it might be your family, whoever it might be, but somebody's got to respond. And I think people get that, but we have to make sure that they understand that it's a volunteer operation and that we need help. And some of the things that we've done over the years, I'm going to tell you, because somebody will be offended at what I think the ideal firefighter is, or what in the fire service we've always thought an ideal firefighter was. What we got to do is we got to think outside the box here, because you got a truck driver in the community who doesn't have any desire to be inside a building when it's on fire, but could drive that truck, put a pager on them, train them up as best you can in the skills that they're going to need, send them out. You need somebody to take pictures of your fire scene, find a photographer who's willing, for the price of a pager, to go out and assist you. You need your bathrooms clean, find somebody who's willing to clean your bathroom. Make them an honorary firefighter if you have to. I mean, there are people out there who will give of their time. You just got to give them a mission. They may not want to go inside a burning building, and we got to have that. Mm-hmm. There's all these ancillary things that, the fundraisers. We're very blessed out here. I don't think we have any fire departments in Kansas who are not tax supported, and a lot of them don't do fundraisers. But back where you're at, That's a huge issue. And a huge time commitment on the part of firefighters to raising money for their departments. And of course, with this COVID stuff, it's went to zero. And that's a big challenge for fire.
Yeah, I know our local station here, they're always raising money, and we support them as often as much as we can. And I know one of the things they've done is they've done the Six of Hearts drawing, and that brings in a lot of money. But during COVID, that was shut down totally.
Right.
And so right now, of course, fortunately, it's back up again, and they're running. But
well, and the other side of that too is that a lot of those folks that we rely upon for funding have lost their jobs, and so they don't have money to give. One of the things the NVFC did, it's kind of a good segue to tell you about this. We have a volunteer support fund, and in the past, it's always been for firefighters who have suffered a monetary loss, like to their house during a nationally declared disaster, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, things like that. We expanded that, I think, about a year ago to include firefighters who lost their homes to a fire, provided they had a working smoke detector inside it. And then just recently, because of the COVID, we expanded that to include firefighters who had suffered some financial difficulties because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I forget now how many tens of thousands of dollars that we gave out, $350 a shot, not a huge amount of money, but enough to be able to show that the volunteer fire service cares about their own. And I read through, I think, all those applications, not to approve or deny, but because I wanted to get a feel for what was going on. And so what I see is, I see volunteer firefighters who have lost their jobs, who maybe mom and dad have both lost their jobs, and they're trying to figure out, because their kids aren't in school, how they're going to take care of their kids and how they're going to make sure that they're educating them properly. And what I read in those applications is, this now allows me to spend more time at my fire station. Wow. Talk about committed to their neighbors. I mean, they're hurting themselves, and yet they're going to go out and help their neighbors even more. I mean, that's just a wow moment. I mean, that just gives me goosebumps to think about those people that are that committed to helping their neighbors.
That's what I'm always blessed by and amazed by, that I hear in Emmitsburg, when there's an emergency, usually the siren goes off. And so the whole community knows something's going on, right? And it goes off in the middle of the night. And I know that there's volunteers who are jumping out of bed, running down the street, or getting in their car and heading to the fire station to respond to that emergency. And they're putting their life on hold for someone else's emergency. And that's just an amazing thing that we have, nearly 70% of those first responder firefighters around the country do that. And so that it's really it's an amazing system that we have here in the country.
Sure it is. I think, a lot of firefighters out there will recognize when I say that my wife and kids never went through a storm with me in the house. Never happened. I was always out. There were a lot of birthday parties, a lot of things that the tones drop and you got to leave. And add to that the fact that those folks, when that siren goes off at 2 o'clock in the morning and they go help somebody, whether it's a fire or a heart attack or a wreck, come 8 o'clock in the morning, they got to be at work, because that's where they earn money. So I mean, you talk about really being committed to helping their neighbors. These are the folks. These are men and women that do.
What would you say to people who are maybe seeing this and are maybe interested in joining, or what does it take to join, as a volunteer?
Well, I think in some places it's making sure that you have a pulse. But obviously I'm being a little facetious about that, but goodness gracious, I would certainly encourage anybody, if you live in a community where there's a volunteer fire company, get out there and volunteer, even if it's, even if you don't want to go inside a building when it's on fire, even if you don't want to deal with blood, there's missions out there. There's tasks that those fire departments need. And certainly, one of the first stops, if you don't know whether you have a volunteer fire station, is go to the makemeafirefighter.org website, type in your zip code, you're probably going to find somebody in the area that you can volunteer your services for. I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times in my lifetime. There isn't anything that you're going to do that's going to be more rewarding than being a volunteer firefighter or EMS professional. There just isn't anything better, really.
Let's circle back as we wrap up here and talk to those volunteers themselves who may be struggling with an incident. And you gave a number earlier, a phone number to call. What's that number? I want to put it up on the screen.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't have that number.
Okay.
I think, but it's give me just a second and we'll
sure,
because I think that's important for us to make sure that you give that. It's the Share the Load program, and let me make sure I give you that phone number. And I'm sorry that I should have had that.
Oh, no problem.
Should have had that ready for you, and I'm glad you asked because it is so important.
So we're talking here with Steve Hirsch. He's out of Kansas. He is the chairman of the National Volunteer Fire Council, and having a conversation about being a volunteer and what it means to serve as a volunteer in the fire service. And we have approximately 70% of firefighters in the U.S. are volunteer, and that's an amazing number. And I know I get blessed with my local fire company here. They've allowed me to come right along with them and experience that. I do a lot of photography for them occasionally, and so it's a blessing for me to serve in that way, not in an official capacity with the fire company, but just as a community member, and to see these men and women in action and serving their communities so well. And it's important that they stay healthy. And that's the one reason we're making this documentary, is to help share their story, and so that we can raise support for our local paid and non-paid emergency responders. And and you said you had a number to people can call.
So Conrad, we do have the number for the Share the Load program. The phone number is 1-888-731 and then FIRE 3473. 888-731-3473. There's a lot of other resources out there, obviously, but that's a good one for people to know about. In addition to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. The good thing about the Share the Load program is that call is going to be answered by a first responder. So it's going to be people who have been through the same type of things that you've been through as a firefighter. If you're experiencing any of those,
And I think that's so important, just in the people that we've talked to around the country. And this, it's important to have someone who you can talk to that understands your position, that understands whether you're a police officer or a medic or a firefighter or a dispatcher, that they understand what you do and how it impacts your mind.
Well, and I think that there is a certain stigma attached to it, so it may be such that I might not want to go to my chief or another firefighter in my department and tell them, hey, I'm struggling with this. So if you do have that ability to do it in-house, great. And hopefully within the departments, we're making it so that there is no stigma, that you can talk freely about it. But if it's getting beyond the level of your company, or if it's something you just don't want to talk about with them, then there's a couple of numbers that you can call that, those are going to be anonymous, and they're going to get you the help that you need. Because I talked earlier about the line of duty deaths, about firefighters who were killed because buildings collapsed on them, or they had a vehicle wreck, or they had a stroke and died. I've talked to families like that, but you got the same issue with families who are left behind when a loved one takes their life. There's no reason for it. There's absolutely no reason for it. It's not to say that there aren't issues that people have with their mental health, but I'm telling you, there's resources out there. And if you're in a leadership position, well, maybe not even leadership position in your department, this is something you need to be doing in your department. day in and day out. Make sure that there's posters out there. Get these numbers up. Make sure that your people know. Don't require them to, oh gee, I'm feeling suicidal today, or I'm feeling extremely sad, so now I got to make 14 phone calls to try and figure out who I'm going to call. Make sure those resources are there, so that all they got to do is pop into the training room and see a phone number posted up there. Even if it isn't a poster, just put the number on the chalkboard or the whiteboard, so that people can get help. There's no reason for this.
Right. Well, Steve, it's been a great time talking to you, and I also want to let everyone know that Steve has joined our advisory team for PTSD 911 documentary, and so we're so grateful that you've done that and been a part of that team. I think we have 10 members now on that advisory board, and kind of people that we can talk to just get some advice for as we move forward with our film project. And so any final comments you have, Steve?
I just want to make sure that those who are volunteer firefighters out there know how appreciated they are. I know, sometimes you feel underappreciated, and we run away from that hero label. But man, I tell you what, if you men and women of the volunteer fire service and EMS service, my helmet's off to you, because without you, your communities look a whole lot different. And for those of you who are listening that haven't yet made that step into the volunteer world, do it, because you will be rewarded in amazing ways by helping out your neighbors when they need your help the most.
Yeah, very good. Well, we've been talking with Steve Hirsch with the National Volunteer Fire Council. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today on First Responder Friday. And if you just hang on 1 minute, I'm going to give a little pitch for what's coming up next week. So next Friday, August 7th, we have JC Ferguson and Pam Opoka is going to be with us. They're talking about dispatch wellness and peer support. They are two amazing human beings who do amazing work in the field of dispatch. So please join us next Friday at 12 noon Eastern time for them. And then coming up Friday, August 14th, Officer Todd Jerry, he is going to be joining us. He's out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, and forget the exact town where he's in, but he's our newest member of our advisory board for the film, and very much involved in officer wellness in his community, and he's really an expert on this subject, and he'll be with us on Friday, August 14th. So a couple of things coming up in the next few weeks. So Steve, thank you for joining us today. This has been First Responder Friday, and thank you for watching. And for those of you who are interested in this, please support our documentary film project and help us get this story told. I appreciate it. You all have a great weekend, and we will talk to you again next week on First Responder Friday.